Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. There are some of you that will know already that we are holding a Remembrance Sunday service, and the Sunday service is being augmented tonight with the very, very emotional pipes and drums of the British Club Bangkok pipe band. Traditionally, Checkinn99 has always held remembrance services, and tonight is no exception. Normally, Remembrance Sunday is held on the 2nd November of every year, and it commemorates the fallen and those that have suffered during all wars. Tonight I'm going to hand over to George. George is the lead drummer and also the only drummer of the British Club Pipe Band tonight, at the moment. And unless we have some more drummers that have been drummed up from outside, I'll hand over to George. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. At the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 98 years ago on Friday, the guns fell silent on the Western Front as a result of a ceasefire agreed between the warring nations in the First World War that had left over 17 million dead. Since that date, 11 a.m. on the 11th of November has been commemorated in many countries with parades and a 2-minute silence. The First World War was so devastating that it was optimistically referred to as the war to end war. However, in Britain, the 2-minute silence and parades had to be shifted in 1939 to the Sunday nearest to the 11th of November, so as not to interfere with wartime production, since the world was already busying itself with the Second World War by then. And there it remains to this day. Thus today is Remembrance Day in Britain and much of the British Commonwealth. We're the British Club Pipe Band. We played at the Remembrance Day Service at the British Embassy this morning, and we feel honoured to be invited here by Chris to come and share the Remembrance Day spirit with you at Checkinn99. We will play a selection of tunes, starting with the traditional funeral lament, The Flowers of the Forest. But first I will read a short poem about the poppies among the First World War graves in Flanders, Belgium. It was written after the death of a close friend killed by a German shell by Colonel John McRae, a Canadian Army doctor, who later also lost his life in the war. In Flanders fields the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row that mark our place. And in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
Remembrance Sunday is a day not of celebration, but it's a day of memory, where we shall not forget the sacrifice, the absolute horror of what those young men during war had to suffer and ultimately pay the supreme sacrifice. It's a day when we learn and learn again of the horror of purposefulness war. It's a day for looking after your mates. It's a day for cherishing your neighbourhood, your home, your family. It's a day where we remember the sacrifices of those young men during war, allows us the freedom to enjoy evenings like this without repression and without continuing horror. It's a day for realizing how rare this wonderful life in the countries that we come from and the countries that we choose to live in, and how precious our life is. Tonight, we're going to invite someone to read what's called the Ode of Remembrance. And we often hear just a snatch of the Ode of Remembrance, written by Lawrence Bunyan, which is just part of a very long and moving, longer poem for the fallen. It was written in 1914, in the days that would become known as the Great War. The Great War in which my grandfather fought and my father fought in the countries of Europe, France, Belgium, Italy. It was a day I remember that my father interned into Belsen-Bergen concentration camp, and it took 18 months to repatriate him. It's a day when my grandfather fought and experienced horrors more than we could ever imagine. We know it as World War I, but no one called it World War I in those days. They called it horror. No one could understand why these young men that came back with shattered bodies, shattered emotions, and we called them shell-shocked. Today, victims of war not only include the ones killed, but the ones emotionally scarred. We now call post-traumatic stress disorder. Let's go back to Bunyan's poem, and it was written whilst Bunyan was on the north coast of Cornwall, opposite the dreadful Western Front. And he looked out across the ocean towards the battlefields, and he reflected on the heavy casualties of the British Expeditionary Force, the Australian Infantry Force, and the other Commonwealth forces, not only on one side, but also the young men that were fighting on the other side. His lines indicate the horror of those young men's lives that had gone through on the battlefield, on either side. And he could not have envisaged how many more millions of young men and young women would be lost in that and subsequent global conflicts. Neither could he have foreseen how his words could become eventually able to encapsulate the thoughts and gratitude of those who would come after him. I'm going to ask a very dear friend of mine, Josephine Ive, to read the short segment of the ode. We're going to have a minute's silence, and I'm going to read the longer version, and then we will hand back over to the British Club Pipe Band. Josephine.
They shall grow old, not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
Ladies and gentlemen, if we could just take a minute just to reflect on things that we don't often think about, and the sacrifice and the horrors that our young soldiers and our young people that were involved in those wars suffered. Just observe a minute's silence. They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end, against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall not grow old, as we grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. They mingle not with their laughing comrades again. They sit no more at familiar tables of home. They have no lot in our labour of the daytime. They're asleep in dark places beyond the phone.